Ephesians Chapter 10, it is still morning time. That's a good thing. It is still morning. We are still well in the middle of the morning, so I'm curious, how many of you are morning people? Alright. So for you, you like church in the morning. We can always have church in the evening. Some of the rest of you would be like, I'm ready for church. Personally, I am a morning person. I have always been a morning person. From the time I was a kid, I would just wake up early, and I would be ready to go early in the morning before the rest of my family. I just love the mornings. That's the time when things are happening. And for me, I would be perfectly happy if the day ended at noon. Because everything necessary happens in the morning. And at the afternoon it's done. There's nothing left. So I'm wondering, what makes a good morning? When you think about whether you're a morning person or not a morning person, what determines that it's a good morning for you? So just think about it. When you think about your mornings and what qualifies as a good morning, how would you finish the sentence? A good morning is when this happens. So I need a couple responses. A good morning is when
I make a mistake and I have time to learn from it.
I make a mistake and I have time to learn from it. There you go. You got all day long to learn from it. All right, John.
Good morning is when I get a good rest.
Good morning is when I get a good rest. All right, wake up ready for the day. Mr. Collins.
Good morning is when I look out the window and our backyard is full of birds.
When the backyard is full of birds. All right. What, Kathy?
Well, about 5 o'clock in the morning, my dog has a bed of road, but she gets out of bed, puts her foot on my chest, and sees if I'm breathing, because she's not going outside. So I get up, take her out, and I'm like, oh my God, my voice will stay up.
When the puppy just puts the paw on your chest, it's a good morning. William?
When the internet's good.
It's a good day when the internet is good.
It's not.
All right, a good morning when the internet is good. Carl?
And when I finish my list, it's a good morning.
It's a good morning when I finish my list. When I get everything done wrong.
A real fresh cup of coffee at the time to drink.
A good morning is a real fresh cup of coffee and the time to enjoy it. All right, one more. Last one. Anybody? A good morning is when? Come on, one more.
Breakfast.
Breakfast. When breakfast happens. It often happens, yes. The morning sets the stage for what's ahead in the day. Sometimes you wake up in a good mood, and really it sets the tone for the day. It's like I'm waking up happy, and so the day, it kind of goes well. And then there's other times, you wake up kind of in a funk, and the day's a little cloudy for a little while, and it takes a little while to get moving. It so often happens that the way the morning goes sets the stage for the day, which is often how it goes in terms of faith and following Jesus. What we set our minds on, what we dwell on, what we fix our attention on, what we pay attention to, determines so much of how our faith goes, or how our following Jesus works. And the Bible repeats this enough, this idea enough, that it is quite a big deal. The things that we pay attention to determine something about how our faith goes, and how our following Jesus goes. We know that this works in everything. The more we pay attention to something, the more that we're geared toward that. Advertising knows this. The more we pay attention to things, the more we're going to like those things. Everything is geared that way, and that's the way that God wired us. God gave us attention to fixate on so that we then discover more about that, and it steers us on a certain course. A couple of questions come out of this. What will we give our attention to? And what can happen when we do? I didn't intend for that to rhyme, by the way. That only helps. But what will we give our attention to, and what can happen when we do? This is for every one of us. It doesn't matter what age we are, it doesn't matter what we've been through or not been through. This is the same for everybody. Kids, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, students, employees, volunteers, cousins, anybody. What we give our attention to determines and shapes something about what happens to us in our lives. The Bible has a lot to say about this, all over the place. And probably nowhere more powerfully than in a passage that just so happens to be on our reading plan this coming week. Ephesians Chapter 3. Paul is writing to a group of churches in a certain area, and he's writing to people who he deeply cares about. He knows these people, he's met a lot of these people, he cares deeply for their faith and what happens to them. And he's writing to them to basically tell them what we're talking about right now, which is where we place our attention and what can happen when we do place our attention in certain places. So let's dig in and see what Paul has to say. Ephesians chapter 3. When I think of all this, I fall to my knees and pray to the Father, the creator of everything in heaven and on earth. I pray that from his glorious, unlimited resources, he will empower you with inner strength through the Spirit. Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. And may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep his love is. May you experience the love of Christ. Though it is too great to understand fully, then you will be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God. That is quite a paragraph. And I agree, amen is a perfect ending to that. It's like, may it be, because that's good stuff. When I read that, I feel this need to hold myself back. Because I feel like I'm pushing forward, I'm reading faster, because the ideas, they're just flowing. They're getting bigger, they're getting stronger, they're getting more amazing, they're getting more unbelievable. And I feel this need of, whoa, this is heavy. And look at all the things that Paul describes that are simply unreal and unbelievable. I mean, empowered by the Spirit, Christ living in our hearts, to trust in Jesus, to be sustained. How is this possible? This is not stuff that we're able to just check off a list or a task that we're able to do. I mean, this is like cosmic and heart level and invisible, and we can't accomplish it sorts of things. These are huge goals, so big that they're unfathomable. But these are like Paul's hopes and Paul's dreams and Paul's desires that could happen in these people. Now, back to reality. How does he get there? If it's that unreal and big, how does Paul arrive at those hopes and those dreams and those desires that these people become this? Well, it's in there. It's right at the beginning. He says, when I think of all this, then all these things come. Well, when he thinks of all what? What is all this? When I think of all this, what's he talking about? Well, unfortunately, we jumped in right in the middle of Ephesians, and so there's the whole beginning part of Ephesians that Paul has been going through in order to get to all this, and that's the all this. When I think of all this that I've been sorting through, and he's been sorting through a lot. So here's a couple examples, so we don't have to read 2.5 chapters. Here's a summary of some of the things that he's been thinking about and talking about. He's talking about these things. God has blessed us, we're united with Christ, God's brought us into a relationship with God, has given us grace and kindness and wisdom. He said Jesus has revealed God's plan for us. And all these huge things, And that's just the first part of chapter 1. There's also chapter 2, there's the beginning of chapter 3, there's a dozen more at least of these kinds of things that Paul has talked about. I mean, he's speeding up. He's getting going. He's pressing the gas pedal. Like, I've got so many things that God has done. And when I put all these things together, and when I think about this, then look what can happen.
Amen.
It's exactly what we were just talking about. When I pay attention to this, then look what can come next. And that pays to our attention. What we pay attention to so often shapes what is possible and what can come next. What we pay attention to matters a great deal. And in a time when our attention spans are woefully shorter, and everybody's are getting shorter and shorter, and everybody's trying to vie for our attention, and there's this huge competition out there to pay attention to this or to this, and we're splintered in so many ways, what we pay attention to matters. Everyone, I think, loves paper chains. Do they not? Oh yes, everybody loves a paper chain. Every kindergarten class must be decorated with paper chains. Many homes are decorated with paper chains. Holidays are decorated and memorialized by paper chains. I love paper chains. You've all made a paper chain in your lifetime, haven't you? Okay, great. We've all made paper chains. So you can help with this. There is one shape that makes up a paper chain, which is what shape? Circle. Circle. Oval, circle, yeah. Okay, two shapes. We'll give it that. So an oval or a circle. If we stretch it, we've got ovals. If we don't stretch it, we have circles. Circles make up a paper chain. Now, under normal circumstances, can the circles in a paper chain ever become squares? No folding allowed. Can a circle become a paper chain? Oh, come on, help me out. Can a circle become a paper chain? No, I'm sorry. Can a circle become a square? No, of course, the circle cannot become a square. Except in amazing situations like these. Let's make it simpler so we don't cloud up everything. Two circles, normal circles, that are making up a paper chain. It is possible for two circles to become a square out of a paper chain. Let's see if it can. Oh, didn't work yet. I'm just kidding, we're not done yet. Can a circle become a square?
Oh, pretty cool, pretty cool.
Guaranteed, you all pay attention to that.
Yeah.
I did too. I knew what was going to happen, and I'm still paying attention to it. And when I see things like that, magic tricks or cool stunts or neat things, I want to know more. I want to know, how did you do that? That was incredible. By the way, there's YouTube videos out there. You can go watch them, and you can do it yourself and about your family and friends. But look what can happen when we pay attention to something. We're like, oh, that's so cool. What else could happen? What more could happen because of that? What we pay attention to matters greatly, and what can happen as a result of it can be huge. As a result of Paul paying attention to all this, all these other things came out. I mean, is it possible, can it be that we can wrap our minds around the idea that we can be empowered, as Paul says, by God's resources? Literally, what Paul is saying is God's glorious riches are given to you and me. That's like out of God's treasure chest. God gives us the fanciest, best that God has for our benefit. God empowers us with the best that God has. What a gift that God has given you and me. when I was almost ready to propose to Kimberly, I had a task before I could propose, and that was that I needed a ring. My brother-in-law's best friend was a diamond, what do you call them? Broker. Yeah, thank you. Precious metals, gems broker. And he said, hey, I'd be happy to help you out. And I said, great. The only problem was I lived in California and he lived in Arizona. And I said, well, how's this going to work? He said, oh, no problem. You just send me what you want. Just give me an idea of what you want. And we'll work back and forth. Okay. So I told him what I wanted, and he said, well, and now it's time to choose your diamond. So give me your address. Okay. So I gave him my work address, and the next day a FedEx envelope showed up. And I went into the conference room at my office because I gave him my work address. I went into the conference room, I opened it up, there's this pile of diamonds in this FedEx envelope. And there's a note that said, well, choose the best one and just send them all back to me. Okay. I had these glorious treasures in my hand. This is what God gives us, to empower us and make us the best that God created us to be. And as Paul says, he does this from the inside out. He empowers us with inner strength. It's like the next line that he describes that Christ can make his home in our hearts. Christ doesn't just come and make his home in our toe, or in our elbow, or in our ear, or in our forehead. He makes his home in our hearts, on the inside, because that's the place where everything flows from. Everything starts in the heart. Everything is controlled by the heart. Every time we have an emotion, we have an emotive response, we have a feeling, we have a reaction to something, it really starts here. And that's what guides our body. That's what guides our words. That's what guides our face and our reactions and the things that we do. He empowers us at the deepest place where we can have the greatest influence. Because he cares deeply for us. And he wants to give us the best. Can it also be that God's love is much more than just a feeling or an emotion, but a reliable foundation, a strong foundation that we grow our roots down into, and we find a strong foundation to grab onto so that we are firmly planted. If we devote our attention to God's love, to learning about God's love, to experiencing God's love, to measuring the expanse of God's love, then we might become rooted and strong in God's love. That's the kind of thing that can nourish us and sustain us and grow us and make us into the people who God created us to be. And in fact, doing just that could open us up to becoming the people that God wants us to be. That's what Ephesians talks about. May we have the power to know, as all God's people should, how wide and long and high and deep God's love is. When we explore it, when we try to see it, when we test it out, when we experience God's love, it seeps into us, and we get to know the extent of God's love for me and for God's world, and that can make us, as Paul says, begin to approach the completeness, the fullness of who God made for you and me to be. I don't even know what that is. I mean, the fullness and completeness of who we are. Maybe this is who God designed us to be. We're just sort of scratching at the surface of what that could possibly be. But that's what's possible when we give our attention to who God made us to be and what's possible because of that. Now, Paul isn't just writing an individual letter to each one of us. I mean, keep in mind, he's writing to loads of people, and when he says, may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, he's saying you together. He's saying us. This is really only possible when we help each other, when we refine each other, when we teach each other, when we ask each other, and we try to figure all this out together. What will what we give our attention to and what can happen when we do. Pay attention is how we say it. We talk about paying attention, as in giving attention, or we pay attention to something. Lots of languages say the same thing differently, but perhaps no more creatively than in Hebrew, which, of course, is the Old Testament's language, and the way the Old Testament talks about things. A couple times in the book of Job, it describes Job, his servant. Have you noticed him? Have you paid attention to him? In Hebrew, the literal way that phrase comes across is, have you set your heart on that thing? Have you set your heart on that person? That's how it describes paying attention. But it's not just like us. Have you looked at, have you noticed, have you thought about, have you put your mind on? They're talking about, have you set your heart on that thing? Have you fallen all over that thing? Have you given all of yourself to that thing? What we pay attention to determines so much of what we will do.
Amen.
And next Sunday, we said that we are celebrating 7 years. And in celebrating 7 years, there's a lot that we're going to do. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I will say we're going to remember a lot of things that we've done. And I am equally prone to forget all of the things that we have done. We're basically going to think about all this, the past 7 years, and remember it. And it is incredible. Many of you know so much of what God has allowed us to do. It is truly incredible. This milestone of 7 years is huge. But what I'm particularly excited about is that it's a milestone on the way to what's next. There may be another 7 years. There may be another 14 years. There may be another who knows what. And this is a milestone on the way to what God is doing next. We're going to pay attention to certain things. I pray and hope that God will reveal what some of our next steps look like. These conversations have already begun. Some of you were talking about this. The core team has started talking about this. I know a lot of these things are going to happen. These conversations are going to happen over the next year. And it may take as much as a year to figure out what are some of these next things that God is leading us into. But what we pay attention to now impacts what can happen and what God can do next. So may we fix our eyes upon Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith. Let's pray.